Welcome again to Joe Stunner Boxing. Last week in boxing news, there was an article on the former British super-welterweight champion, or light middleweight champion as it used to be called then, Jimmy Baton. And if in case you don't know, Jimmy Baton was one of those British titleists who is pretty much largely forgotten, which I think is a little bit unfair. He turned pro in June of 1974. And he had, I think, about a 9-year career up to 1983. Back end of 1983, I think it was, he retired. Like I say, he was British champ. I think he made 2 defences of the title. And in the old days, I think you had to make 3 successful defences to win the Lonsdale belt outright. Nowadays, it's you can win it, make 2 defences, and you get the belt. So I think Jimmy just missed out. And in fact, he lost his British title on a 9th round KO to another extremely good, underrated British fighter called Pat Thomas, who was originally from St Kitts, but I think he settled in Cardiff, not Swansea, but there's Cardiff, yeah. And he was match tough. I mean, if you look at Pat Thomas's record, I think he ended up with about 18 defeats and 35 wins, something like that. 3 draws maybe. But he wasn't stopped that often, Pat Thomas. And in fact, he went the 15-round distance with Harold Graham. He got an 8-round draw with Tony Simpson, who was another 2-time British champ and 3-time world title challenger. So Pat Thomas, despite his patchy record, could really fight. And it took someone of his caliber to stop Jimmy Baton and take his title. Now, even though he was British champ and he beat some decent men, Baton this is, I mean, for example, towards the end of his career, he got an 8-round decision over Jimmy Cable. He was a good fighter, Jimmy Cable. But the thing he's most renowned for, Jimmy Baton, is going the distance in America with Roberto Duran. He lost over 10 rounds. And this was in 1982. It was only about a year before he retired. Duran at the time was 74 wins and 4 defeats. In fact, this was in 1982. He was coming off 2 defeats, Duran. One was to Wilfred Benitez, which he lost a 15-round points decision to Benitez. And the other one was the shocker, which was Ring Magazine's upset of the year, which was to Kirkland Lang. Now, after those 2 defeats, his career was, in the carsy, so to speak. So they brought another Briton over, which was Jimmy Baton. They thought, okay, I've lost to one, I'm not going to lose to this one. And Duran won the fight. It was a super welterweight. Duran, I think, won probably about eight of the rounds. But there's no doubt that Baton did himself proud and did the country proud. And he hung in there. He made Duran work. But it was for the most part, it was one-way traffic. Now, Duran, actually, after that win, despite only winning 1 fight in 3 in 1982, he would, let me get this right now, because I know he fought Pepino Cuevas. I think he stopped Cuevas in 4 rounds. What was the other win? He had another win as well. Okay, so in 1982, he beat Jimmy Baton. Then it was Cuevas, and then I think, I'm not certain about this, I think he fought Davey Moore as a voluntary. And if you've ever seen that fight, Davey Moore ended up getting smashed to bits, and it was one of the worst beatings I've ever seen from Duran. One of the worst beatings I've ever seen. So only a year after fighting Jimmy Baton, Duran was a world champ again. That was for the WBA super welterweight title. And he was expected to be outboxed and beaten up by Davey Moore. In fact, it was a horrendous beating he gave Moore. Moore was never the same after that fight. And then in his next fight, Duran fought Marvin Hagler and lost over 15. So in the mix amongst Pepino Cuevas, Davey Moore, Wilfred Benitez, Marvin Hagler, you've got the name Jimmy Baton, which a lot of people forget this. they think of Kirkland Lang beating Duran. And okay, he won, but Jimmy Baton didn't win. But don't forget, I mean, to take on one of the four kings in the middle of all that, so that maelstrom of immense talent, to go over to America and fight a 10-rounder against an absolute legend, arguably the greatest lightweight ever. A lot of people think he is. It's open to debate, of course. But yeah, Jimmy Baton. I just thought I'd mention him because the age I am, I sort of caught the sort of tail end of his career, and same with Pat Thomas and a lot of those fighters from that era. And the ones that were coming through were sort of Harold Graham and people like that, like I said earlier, Tony Simpson. I saw Tony Simpson fight live, actually. But yeah, it was a sort of overlap, if you like, because in 82 I would have been 14, 15. And I missed the start. I missed Batten's reign as champ, as British champ. But I remember the Roberto Duran fight and, the shock that he'd gone the distance. And, it was a moral victory, even the proverbial moral victory, even though he lost. Well, Batten ended up with 40 wins, 20 KOs. He had 9 defeats, 5 by stoppage. He fought for the EBU title, but got knocked out in 3 rounds. I can't remember who it was against. I know I think he went to Italy and got knocked out in 3. And he actually finished his career. His final fight was against another extremely good fighter, Prince Rodney. Prince Rodney stopped him in 6. Jimmy Baton was past his best. That was in October of 83. That was his final fight. And Prince Rodney himself, I think, let me get this right now. I know he fought Chris Pyatt towards the end of his career and got stopped. Yeah, he fought Jimmy Cable. He knocked out Jimmy Cable, I think, in one round, 2 rounds. Very early anyway. But a very capable fighter, Prince Rodney. From, I think, he's from Yorkshire. Was he Yorkshire? Sheffield or Huddersfield? Lancashire? I can't remember. I think it was Yorkshire. Anyway, my mind's wandering. Anyway, so go and have a look at some of these names. Jimmy Baton, Pat Thomas, Prince Rodney, Jimmy Cable. It was a good domestic era around about that sort of welterweight, super welterweight, There must be stuff on YouTube. I mean, I'm sure I've watched stuff on YouTube. I've got loads of the old DVDs of fights and everything. I go back to VHS tapes. I've still got them, although they probably don't work anymore. But there's going to be something on YouTube. Watch these guys. There's lots of good fights. Lots of It's interesting to see what is almost considered the dark ages of boxing now. I mean, these were the days of Mickey Duff, Jarvis Astaire, Mike Barrett, Terry Lawless, the Cartel. But Frank Warren was just about to come along. In fact, he was the first Warren show I ever went to was mid-80s, probably. Yeah, probably in the mid-80s. Can't remember what it was. Might have been at the York Hall or some leisure centre somewhere. I saw a few Warren shows in like civic centres and in the late 80s, early 90s. But I can't remember who I saw offhand. This was a little bit later, but I know I saw Pat Barrett, Zofa Barrett's trainer and uncle. He was a killer. Pat Barrett, I thought, would be a world champion. I saw him win his British title with a horrendous knockout, one-punch knockout. I saw him fight a few times live. He was really good, but he never really fulfilled his potential. He never won that world title. He was European champ, British champ. But that's a little bit after this. If you go back, say, one generation, you end up with people like Jimmy Baton and Pat Thomas and Prince Rodney, and they were good fighters. Check them out on YouTube. Go and have a look. Anyway, I just thought I'd share a few thoughts about boxing in the sort of late 70s, early 80s, because I think a lot of it gets forgotten. And with YouTube and other outlets, you can go and watch these fights. Whereas in the old days, you had to order them on VHS tape. And then it was delivered like 2 weeks later, and you got to watch the fights and through like grainy film. Now it's all on YouTube. Go and have a look, see what you think. Comments below. Thank you as always for your time, and please subscribe to the channel if you're new. Hit the like button, and I'll catch you later. Bye for now.